And welcome into the Hard Count. It is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. Last one on the face of the planet. Yes, it's March. Yes, we got some madness. I've said it before. College basketball, to me, is the best postseason in all of sports. Now, with that being said, I think college football is the best sport, period. So we'll enjoy March Madness. We're also going to make sure we bring our own madness, though, to this month, talking about what I just mentioned, the greatest sport that has ever existed. All right, we got a lot to jump into. Some new rules now being proposed across college football. We'll see which ones of these end up being a reality, but we'll unpack which ones you got to keep your head on a swivel for. Spring Intel, we hope to hear out of Nebraska. We'll unpack that. Returning production numbers just dropped. What do we think about those? A couple of teams now that are going to be national title contenders you would expect. Look next to the returning production, though, and you got triple digits next to those names when it comes to guys they're bringing back next year. How much does that matter? We'll talk about it together. So fired up to be talking ball with y'all today. As we do every single Tuesday, though, we got to start by giving you a projection for the top 10 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I go back to what we do every Tuesday. Every Tuesday, we give you a top 10. So the top 10 for this week, like I just mentioned, predicting who the top 10 quarterbacks are going to be at the end of 2025. If you're new to the show, welcome. It's always college football. Make sure you are subscribed. We got podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify. Go ahead and lock in over there. Leave us a review. Just helps us get more of what you want to see onto the show. But let's waste no more time and get to our projection of the top 10 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. At number 10, now again, this is a projection. Okay, so this is not a current ranking. At number 10, I got Joey Aguilar transferring to UCLA from App State. Now, this is a Cato special. Cato producer of the Hard Count. App State alum. He and I talked about this for the better part of 20-ish minutes. I'm seeing what he's seeing. Okay, Joey Aguilar played a lot of ball, went to multiple JUCOs, started multiple years at App State, went over 3,000 yards each of the last 2 years. But there's more to this than just the experience for a Joey Aguilar, while we're projecting to be a top 10 guy next season in the conference. Tino Sunseri is the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at UCLA, previously at Indiana with Curt Cignetti. You look at this dude's track record. I mean, in his Twitter bio, it says the sniper mentality. I don't know exactly what that means, but it fires me up when you say it. But that mentality has been true to how he has helped quarterbacks each of the last 3 years that have transferred in. They spend one season with him, have a ton of success. All right, each of the last 3 transfer quarterbacks he had, most recently Curtis Rourke, have played some of their best football, if not their best football, their entire career. And with Joey Aguilar transferring in from App State to UCLA, I see no reason why that wouldn't be the case. Okay, so Joey Aguilar for us, top 10 guy going into next season, at the end of next season, I should say, within the Big Ten for 2025. Now at number 9, another transfer, a bit of a theme here, Fernando Mendoza. Mr. 98 yards with my boys. That post-game interview on the field with Morgan Uber, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. I mean, the dude just bringing absolute juice to the table after they went out and beat Stanford. Transfers over from Cal. Okay, now solid year last year. When we talk about Joey Aguilar and what he is at UCLA, I also feel the same way about Fernando Mendoza with the system he's entering into. Curtis Rourke, second mention from my guy across the program, so good for Curtis Rourke, former Indiana quarterback. Mike Shanahan is going to be his offensive coordinator. Curt Cignetti, his head coach, obviously. There's a blueprint there, I think, for success for Fernando Mendoza, who had a good year last year. He's at number 9. At number 8, DeMond Williams, quarterback at Washington. Now, when you watch this dude play ball, didn't start the entirety of last year for Washington, but went absolutely ballistic in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. If we're drinking too much of the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl Kool-Aid, then we don't apologize for that. Had 5 total touchdowns, over 400 total yards. Again, guy's just a ball player, man. I think with a little bit more time for the offense to be built around him, I think that will only cater to him having more success. Love what he is as a dual threat. And people throw out the word dual threat or the phrase dual threat kind of casually. Like, he legitimately, if you don't take the proper angle on DeMond Williams, he'll make you pay. He's got legitimate giddy up and go from the quarterback position. So really excited to see what he is next year. Had multiple plays on his highlight tape where he's just not just making dudes miss, but destroying the angles of defenders. I think they got him dead to rights, so it's a quarterback. He takes off and gets extra yardage because they misjudged what he brought to the table there. So DeMond Williams, one of the most electric players, I think, in this conference going into next season. Really, really juiced to see what he is next year. He's at number 8 for me. Now, number 7, Nebraska's Dylan Raiola. kind of up and down last year. True freshman a season ago, took his lumps. I'm buying stock in Dylan Raiola for 2025 because of how he finished last season. Remember, at the end of the year, they switch offensive coordinators. Dana Holgorsen takes over the show in Lincoln. And whenever Dana Holgorsen got the play calling duties at Nebraska, Dylan Raiola averaged a 70% completion percentage for the end of the season. So I saw a lot of success at the end of the year. I think having a full year under his belt to figure out college football, this is why you brought Dylan Raiola to Nebraska. We got more thoughts on Nebraska later in the show, but this is why you brought him here, to be able to turn things around. And I think the turnaround should start in his second season and should be something that you see a lot of in Matt Rule's third year, which is obviously when he does his best work. Now at number 6, this is the trickiest ranking for me in terms of where his spot is. I could see this guy being all the way up at 2, to be real with y'all. I got Luke Altmyer at 6 from Illinois. Now, the reason for that being, loses his top 2 pass catchers from a season ago. Again, this is a projection to next year. There's a lot of guys that I just think are supremely talented that should have their say on the Big Ten next season. Luke Altmyer now is an all Big Ten honorable mention from last season. So this dude can play some football. If you were doing a ranking off of what you know about them, off of like proven commodities going into next season, Luke Altmyer is at number 2. But I think this just shows how vicious the Big Ten Conference is at the quarterback position going into next season, which is good for college football. So Altmyer at 6, not a knock on him, just a lot of talent around the conference. Now, Bryce Underwood for me is at 5. Now, I totally hear all the Illinois fans, all the Ohio State fans throwing things and saying, why do you got this guy 5 before he's even touched a football field at the collegiate level? I hear you. This is a gamble. Again, we're predicting the end of the season. This is a gamble. And the gamble for me is that Bryce Underwood is as special as everyone continues to tell us that he is. Like, the physical giftings aren't the question. The size isn't the question. The question is, how does he acclimate to the college game? I think he'll be the guy from day one. I think Chip Lindsey's offense is going to cater to his skill set. If Bryce Underwood has some weapons around him to maximize and help his overall maturation process, like, he could be a lot higher than number 5. So 5, before he's even touched the football field, might feel generous. Y'all, I'm just telling you, he could finish higher on this list, depending on, again, what's around him and how quickly he's able to put it all together. But if it's purely off talent, I mean, there's no telling where this guy ranks. Not just in this list, but across college football. I feel that strongly about him. Last thing I'll say, rated 100 overall as a recruit. 100. That is the first 100 overall grade we've given out here at On 3. So I think that means something, and we're going to go ahead and buy the trend there with Bryce Underwood at number 5. And number 4, Jaden Maiava from USC. Are we really doubting that a Lincoln Riley quarterback isn't going to have a tremendous season? And a lot of people are very quick to say, well, J.D. Miller-Moss. And look, Miller-Moss wasn't the problem last year. Like, they had to change the music at the party because they were having issues, but it wasn't like Miller-Moss wasn't playing well. Miller-Moss missed the majority of November and still was darn near top 10 in the Big Ten in passing last season. So, like, it's not a Miller-Moss issue for USC. Jaden Maiava, the way that he finished last year, finished on a heater, Lincoln Riley's words, not ours. He also has the chops, I think. It's not just a projection with him, like you've seen what he can be. Notre Dame had arguably the best secondary in college football last year. They held teams like 160 a game or something ridiculous. Jaden Maiava took them for 360 through the air. Nobody else in college football took it for more than 300. So I get that's one game. Maybe we're extrapolating too much from one sample size, but I think Jaden Maiava is going to be a dude. And I think Lincoln Riley, once again, has a ball player at quarterback, and it's going to be Jaden Maiava, a top 5 guy next year in the conference. At number 3, Dante Moore. 5-star plus cat, coming over to Oregon from UCLA. The Oregon offense, and I want to make sure I say this the correct way, I don't think the Oregon offense is a super demanding offense physically on the quarterback position. They're not asking you to throw a bunch of field comebacks and all these NFL tight window throws. That's not knocking the quarterback. That's just telling you that's what Will Stein's asking you to do to have success. And they've had a lot of success the last couple of seasons with 2 Heisman Trophy finalists at the quarterback position. Both transfers. Dante Moore, also a transfer, as we mentioned. So to bring this point home, the physical part of it won't be an issue for Dante Moore. It's going to be about, does he have control of the system? The reason why I like him at number 3 is he's had a full year now to get his legs underneath him, to figure out the system, to see Dylan Gabriel do it at a high level, and I trust Will Stein to be able to put him in position to be enormously successful. One more thing I'll say, too, schedule for Dante Moore is not going to be the gauntlet that Dillon Gabriel was dealing with a season ago. So I'll leave that there. But at number 3, Dante Moore. Now, number 2, I got Ohio State's Julian Sayin. It's funny to have him this high because he still has to win the job. I think he will. I think that when you talk about the Ohio State quarterback position, it would be a little bit irresponsible if we're projecting towards the end of the season from where I'm sitting here, to not think they're going to have a top 3 guy in the conference. Now, again, I don't think Julian's saying, and he hasn't done it just yet. So, again, this is a massive prediction. But he was deemed as the most accurate passer in the cycle when he came out of high school. Got to sit for a full year. And the thing with Ohio State to me is like they haven't had a dude finish outside the top 3 when it comes to passing yards in the Big Ten since 2016. And everyone's going to be very quick. Kyle McCord finished second in the Big Ten in passing yards. Kyle McCord also last season led the country in passing at Syracuse. Now, I get he didn't do it at Ohio State, so that's a different discussion to be had. But with the weapons, with Ryan Day, all these things, I get it's a new coordinator. I still want to see how that all comes together. But I just think with the talent around Julian Sayin, the talent Julian Sayin has, and the fact that Ryan Day, everyone seems to forget, has a quarterback pedigree to himself, I think that Julian Sayin is going to do extremely well for the Buckeyes next season. I think he'll be the number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten when it's all said and done. Now, at number 1, if you have anyone besides Drew Aller on your projection for the Big Ten next year to be the top quarterback, you're just kind of guessing. Like, maybe you're right, and if you are, more power to you. But there's nothing, I don't think, tangible to look at outside of Drew Aller being number 1 guy that to me would make a whole lot of sense. Going to be a 3-year starter. Took Penn State to the semifinals this season ago. Took them to the Big Ten title game. The big question around Drew Aller isn't with Drew Aller. To me, it's more so can they get him some weapons? Because Tyler Warren is a freak show, and he's gone to the NFL. Bringing Kyron Hudson from USC, which I think was a very sneaky portal addition for the Nittany Lions. You would hope / expect they're active in the spring portal to get him some more weapons. But when it comes to Drew Aller, like, I don't have any question about his ability. You even look at the Boise State game a season ago. There's a drive at the end of the half, and he's just dealing seeds downfield. And his receivers are not helping him out at all. He got drops, going off the fingertips. And I get it was Boise State, but if it were just about pure ability, and I think ability should have a large part in this whole list, I think Drew Aller being at number 1 is the only right answer for my money. So to recap it here, at number 10, the transfer from App State to UCLA, Joey Aguilar, little Tino Sinceri special sniper mentality. You got to love it. At number 9, 98 yards with my boys, Fernando Mendoza, going to be at Indiana next season. Damon Williams, number 8 from Washington. Dylan Raiola at 7. Luke Altmaier at 6. Bryce Underwood at 5. Jaden Money Mayava at 4. Dante Moore at 3. Julian Sayin at 2. And Drew Aller at number 1 for us on our projection for the top 10 quarterbacks at the end of next season in the Big Ten Conference. Let me know your thoughts there. I get that we'll have a bunch of different responses and a bunch of different combinations of a top 10. That's why it's fun. It's why it's a good time to break this down here in the month of March around the college football season. But regardless, let me know your thoughts, and looking forward to unpacking your responses here over on the socials, on Instagram and Twitter at JD PicKell. Now, I got good news for y'all. Roback's back, baby. Back like they never left. It's funny to say they're back because they never really left the show. But we got Roback bringing you the hard count today. Only one way to describe Roback, baby. Best fit, best feel. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Roback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Roback has released a ton of items within their new licensed game day collection, and it is my absolute favorite. Novel polo designs, clean hoodie, Q-tip designs for some of your favorite schools. Definitely worth you checking it out, all right? Nobody else on the market pairing these level of custom designs with this quality level of active wear. Roback's got everyday shorts, or for the pants wearers, Delta Performance pants. Perfect pairing. Super comfortable, elastic waistband, great fabric, all you need, all right? So Roback has been also proudly leading the NIL charge, some partnerships with multiple college stars, past and present, becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Most important part right here. Use code JD, no periods, just those 2 letters, JD, on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com, 20% off all performance polos, shorts, the game day collection. Lock it in, code JD, and save yourself some money. And just look good, feel good as we roll into March here and making the most of this whole thing as we just hurtle towards spring football. So appreciate Roback bringing us the hard count today, bringing y'all the hard count today, and just keeping us look good and feeling good, and bringing your best is what it's all about here on this show. So speaking of bringing our best, Cato on the ones and on the twos, all right, making everything you see here happen. Getting Joey Aguilar in the top 10 there, man, that was huge. That was huge. I mean, we got the Michael Jordan shrug from the boy. Just, hey, at the end of the season, we'll be the ones laughing here when it comes time for, I guess, early December, and UCLA is putting up big numbers offensively. Tino Sinceri, sniper mentality. All right, I digress. We'll move right along here. Returning production rankings are something we reference a lot on this show for those of y'all that have been tuned in for any length of time. I appreciate returning starters. I think that matters. I'm much more intrigued by returning production. Bill Connolly for ESPN does this every single year, and we love to refer to it when we're breaking down games or trying to put together predictions for teams. And returning production rankings, to me, are a lot like your vacation plans. It's interesting to see. It's always a good thing to have a gauge for, but a lot of times it comes down to context. Like, hey, we're going to Hawaii. Awesome. Where are we staying? How much are we charging to stay? How much freedom do we have to get off the resort? And like you see, context is important for your vacation as much as it is for returning production rankings. We bring back 80% production. That's awesome. Were y'all any good last year? Is it good that you're bringing that much returning production back? You see where I'm going with this? So I want to unpack this for a couple of different teams, but when you pull that list up, Clemson is just chilling there at number 1 after just winning the ACC and giving Texas a pretty good fight in the second half of that game and seeing Cade Klubnik do what he did. And I keep going back to this. When we talk about Clemson in the context of competing for a national championship next year, I don't get why that's not being said out loud more frequently. Now, some of that could be it's March, so if that's your reason, I mean, no fault there. But it really does feel a lot like I've kind of got like the wrong address to a party. Those are kind of the vibes. Nobody else is really here. We're just sitting here saying, hey, Clemson can win the whole darn thing. And we're just hanging out like, yeah, but Alabama's got better odds. I think Tennessee's got better odds. Not to dunk on either of those schools, but with Clemson having the number 1 returning production in all of college football next season, y'all, Dabo's doing it right now. And it's not something we thought we would say 3 years ago, but Dabo is doing a lot of the things that we had asked Clemson and asked Dabo to do to go compete for national championships. And a lot of the pushback around Dabo Swinney, if you don't think he's the best coach in the sport, we're not saying he's the best coach in the sport, but if you don't think that he is still one of the top coaches in the sport, a lot of that opinion is tied to his failure to adapt to the transfer portal. And they've dipped their toe in it. They're not wholesale jumping into the portal all the way, but they've dipped their toe in it. The thing for me, though, is the reason why they are number 1 in returning production in some small part is because they don't go to the portal. Like, if you're loyal to your roster is able to be loyal back to you. I don't think, and I can't prove this, but I don't think Clemson's having a lot of conversations with their guys after the season, the exit meetings, and saying, hey, thanks so much for all you've done. We're actually going to bring someone in to replace you via the portal. Hey, you don't have a spot here next year. We'd love to help you, but you don't have a spot here next year. It's not the case. Why? Because Clemson doesn't really use the portal all that frequently. Use it in some small fashion here, given this past cycle, but that allows you to have the number 1 returning production. That promotes a feeling of, again, loyalty. It promotes an environment of growth, all those things. And so to have the roster they had last year, that, again, was good enough to go win the ACC and get you into the college football playoff, I think Clemson is massively dangerous. And the other thing I'll add here, when you talk about Clemson the last couple of seasons, I've been critical of them because I didn't think they had the dudes. Like those Clemson teams the last couple of seasons haven't been at the same talent level in my estimation of what was showing up in the college football playoff when they had that 6-year run, when they were winning national titles. I don't know if they have it to the same degree, but I think they're in that same threshold. I think they're in that same tier to compete for national championships. Because you think about those Clemson teams, what did they have? A proven commodity at quarterback. Okay, Cade Klubnik. I'll go ahead and check that box. If you need to see more, be my guest. What he did against Texas, to me, is more than enough. Got it. Okay, we need to see a temperature on defense that is aggressive, the enforcers, all those things. I don't know if you got Christian Wilkins walking out of the tunnel anytime soon to play defensive line for you, but you brought in a guy in Tom Allen who ran one of the best, most aggressive defenses in college football last season at Penn State. game away from playing for the national championship, a field goal away from playing for a national championship. Okay, I think that probably checks that box. Had a top 15 sack rate in the country. Okay, got it. They had weapons, which was the big thing. We harped on that for a long time. Clemson, I don't care if you go to the portal or not, why don't you have dudes that strike fear in the heart of your secondary every single Saturday? I got 3 dudes. Antonio Williams, who's back for more, Bryant Wesco, and TJ Moore. Both dudes that were freshmen a season ago. Top 3 weapons, all back. So will they do it? I mean, I have no clue. We're going to have to see this whole thing play out. I want to get a better gauge for what happens out of fall camp. But the overall talent level at Clemson is good enough. They bring back a ton around them. The culture is going to be the culture at Clemson consistently with Dabo Swinney. There should be national title expectations at Clemson. And there always should have been, because that was the level you had achieved at for a long time. But with this roster, with this quarterback, with this staff, I love everything about Clemson. And so for them to be number 1 returning production is just even more fuel to that fire. I do not get why it's so quiet on the Clemson front. Maybe it's a brand thing. Maybe it's a conference thing. I don't know. But for Clemson, they are a national title contender this season. And it's not really even for me up for debate when you talk about the Tigers. So number 1, yeah, that's encouraging. Now, Oklahoma is a school that we're high on, and they're at number 10 in the returning production rankings. Now, I think this is a difficult thing to unpack, because Oklahoma last year, everybody knows it. People in Norman, Oklahoma know it. It was nowhere near their standard. Nowhere near their standard. To go 6 and 7, absolutely not. But with top 10 returning production, you have a glass half full or a glass half empty approach you can take. The glass half empty approach is what I said at the top of this thing: context matters. Hey, that's great, you're top 10. But you had a roster now that season ago was nowhere near good enough. So was it good to return production that was good enough for 6 and 6 last year? Probably not. To me, it's less about the production itself and what it equated to, as much as it is the human beings that make up the production. Because the thing you can trick yourself into when you break down, these lists of production numbers and things of that nature is you forget there's actual human beings behind those productions. There's actual people that make up a culture, that make up a locker room. And so when we look at Oklahoma, I think it's about how much do you trust Brent Venables with what they bring back. Because to me, I'm looking at a group that I trust Brent Venables. This is a bunch of production that comes back from a roster that has been in the Brent Venables process, Brent Venables' way of doing things. That was why you hired him, right? You brought in Brent Venables because you believed in his way of doing things, his mentality, his blue-collar, hard hat, lunch pail, high-energy aggression, all those things. That was the reason you brought Brent Venables in. And so if that's the kind of operation he's been running in Norman, I feel good about the people that are still in that locker room that are coming back. The only difference is you bring in a quarterback now and an offensive staff that will actually be competent. And yes, you lose some pieces, of course. A Billy Bowman, a Danny Stutzman, there's no way to sugarcoat that. But I feel really, really excited about the way that they are trending because of the quarterback and because of the stability, I think, across the roster. A lot less you're hoping for. A lot less where you are rolling the guys out there and saying, we'll see if this floats. Because you brought back a lot on defense a season ago. Offense was very much so, we'll see. 5-star quarterback, that's great. Offensive line, we'll see. And we saw. Offense was horrific in large part because of, yes, the injury bug, but in large part because of the offensive line as well. So the point I'm trying to make here is I trust Brent Venables. I trust his process. And by nature of trusting the process, I trust the people that have been a part of that process. And I think they'll be in good shape there with John Mateer on the show in 2025. So those are a couple of schools that are on the higher end here. Now, this is news. 136 FBS teams. Delaware and Missouri State. Welcome to the FBS. Glad to have you. 136 FBS teams. Those are 2 teams in the top 10. We'll maybe unpack some more teams in that tier a little bit later as we progress here throughout this part of the year. But I want to talk about a couple of teams that are maybe alarmingly low in these rankings. We'll start with Ohio State. Ohio State is at 101 in the returning production rankings out of 136. I see that, and I get why it could be scary if you're an Ohio State fan, and you're not probably all that alarmed to see that you lost a lot, but, you have a number to it probably means something. I'm not so much worried about the production as I am intrigued by the new staff, because Chip Kelly brought a lot to the table. Jim Knowles brought a lot to the table, your coordinator a season ago. But if the question is, can Ohio State repeat? I think they can. Now, are we predicting it right now? We'll give it a little bit longer before we call our shot on the 2025 season officially. But Georgia, the year they went back-to-back, this is the second time, they were 96th in returning production going from 2021 to 2022, I believe it was. And much like Georgia, like, yes, it's Ohio State. What I mean by that is they're always going to recruit at a top-tier level. Always. Like Ohio State, we said it maybe it was 2 shows ago, haven't had anything outside the top 5 in the last 5+ years. Georgia, same deal. They recruit always in the top 3. So, yes, it's unfortunate to lose experience, but you have 5-star cats waiting in the wing. And that was one reason why we pushed back on the Michigan comparison. Not that Michigan isn't still going to be a force for Ohio State when they have to play each other. That'll be a whole other thing that we'll talk about in and of itself. But the Michigan fall-off, I think, is different than what Ohio State has coming back in 2025. Like, Michigan was 128th in returning production, so a good 27 spots lower the year after they won the national title. They also replaced their head coach. Ohio State's not replacing their head coach. Ohio State also, unlike Michigan, has recruited at a much higher level. Michigan, in that same thing we just talked about for Ohio State last 5 years, I believe in the last 4-ish years, Michigan's recruited one top 10 class. It was number 9. Now, that'll change for Michigan. It's not a Michigan segment, but the point I'm trying to make here is the overall talent nucleus at Ohio State, just because it's some names that aren't known nationally as much, doesn't mean they're not going to step up and be dudes for you this upcoming season. So why was Georgia able to repeat, and why do we feel good about Ohio State not having a massive drop-off? One, what we just said, the talent level. Okay, check. The second piece of this, though, Georgia repeated because Stetson Bennett became an absolute dog, no pun intended. Like, he elevated his game. He elevated the entire offense. This is where the question arises. Can that be Julian Sayin? Can he keep everything rolling? Because if he can, we just said the talent's able to be activated across the board. Jeremiah Smith having his say on any given Saturday is going to, I think, be something you want to see happen if you're a Buckeye fan. And Julian Sayin bringing what he brings to the table, a guy who was the most accurate quarterback in his cycle out of high school, Nick Saban wanted and had him on his team for a period of time. The clues check out to me on Julian Sayin. So I'm not making a firm prediction right now on Ohio State winning the Big Ten or not winning the Big Ten. Like, my point being here, yes, 101st in returning production looks a little bit alarming. And no, it's not good to lose all that you lost to the NFL. There's no way to minimize that. But I'm not pounding the alarm on Ohio State and saying, oh my gosh, they're going to fall off the face of the earth. No, there's too much built in there. Ryan Day's too good of a head coach. There's too much talent. If they don't have the success they want to have, I think you look at their coordinators and their ability to adjust. Then you also look across the conference and say, well, the Big Ten also is, I believe, right now the best conference in college football. So there's that. Now, one other team I want to talk about, Georgia is 105th in these rankings. Y'all, this is an optical illusion. It's an optical illusion because a lot of people will see this and say Georgia underachieved, in air quotes, a season ago, and they don't bring back nearly as much. Is Georgia going to drop off? Y'all, no, they're not going to drop off. Going back to it being an optical illusion. The reality is Georgia actually went out and added some other pieces to this roster that don't account for the production from a season ago, but are going to be some dudes. Now, should you ever worry about the defense at Georgia? I don't think so, because Kirby Smart's your head coach. Now, they had never been outside the top 2 in total defense in the SEC since 2017. Last year, to me, with the output they had, a mix of bad luck, a mix of the conference maybe getting better, I'm not worried yet because of Kirby Smart, because of Glenn Schumann and all that. In addition to that, on the offensive side, some people are going to say, well, yeah, but look at all that you lose in the passing game. You lose to Carson Beck. Y'all, they were going to lose Carson Beck either way. He was going to the NFL, and then he's going to Miami. Okay, it's essentially the same to you if you're a Georgia fan. And as much as you knock Georgia and not winning the national title and the offense looking how it looked, they still won the SEC in their down year. So I think the big point here for me when we talk about Georgia in the context of what they bring back, I want to make sure we say this. It's going to look different. It's going to look very, very different offensively. I think Gunnar Stockton will win the job. But Georgia, I've been told from people close to that program, they're going to find a way to run the football. Like, no matter the circumstance, they're going to find a way to be a team that can punish you on the ground. And when they do that, you'll have to respect the box a little bit more. I expect Gunnar Stockton to be mixed into that run game. there's an attitude there for Georgia. Now, some of it will be new faces. There's no way around that, but I really believe that to be the case for them, and that's how they feel internally. On top of that, Georgia went out and understood that they had some needs to meet at wide receiver. Y'all, recruiting at the high school level plus the portal, Georgia's added 7 wide receivers. I don't think Kirby Smart's heard everyone, including myself, talking about how much Georgia's led the country in drops. Went out and get Zachariah Branch, who I thought was one of the better offensive weapons for USC ability-wise. Then Noah Thomas, a dude who did big numbers at Texas A&M, was their wide receiver one a season ago. They're going to find a way to push the ball downfield as well. Now, it might be a run-to-pass outfit. I don't know if that'll be the case. It would be contrary to what they've been in the past under Mike Bobo, but like they are going to be different looking when it comes to that offense next season. I'm not talking about a scheme change. I'm talking about overall a mentality change. So same thing we said about Ohio State. Yeah, you're in the hundreds in returning production. Does that really matter? For other schools, it might. I don't think it matters nearly as much for Georgia when you recruit a top 3 class essentially every single year. So talented true freshmen on the receiver side of things, talented portal guys on the receiver side of things, a quarterback that I think will be in line with what you want to do running the football. Georgia's not going anywhere. I know the production rankings look a certain way. Georgia is not going anywhere, and I can essentially promise you that in 2025. So speaking of things not going anywhere, we got penalty flags not going anywhere, which is unfortunate. But some new rules are being proposed in accordance with those penalty flags. Chris Vanini from The Athletic has a write-up on the rules that are proposed. I want to walk through a couple of these because if you're a college football fan, I just want us to all be like in the know together on this thing and just walk through these. Some of these make sense. Some of these I think are maybe a little bit foolish, but a lot of them are being proposed based on what happened in the 2024 season. Like the rule proposed here, the first one is any injury after the ball is spotted will cost a timeout to the team that has the injury. How many times do we see Ole Miss? Sorry, Ole Miss, but this is you were a repeat offender. They would have the ball spotted, look to the sideline, and all of a sudden, conveniently out of nowhere, somebody would catch a cramp and they would go down. And clear as day, we're all like, hey, man, I hope everyone's okay, but this is the 7th injury this drive. We got to figure something. There has to be some sort of repercussions for faking an injury, if that was the case. Now, to me, I see this and I'm like, that's great. I appreciate the hope there. This is a lot just like spraying Axe over something that smells kind of nasty when you were in middle school. You know what I'm talking about? Like you would go to PE and you would maybe feel like you had to rush to lunch or class or whatever you were doing. I'm not going to shower. I'll just throw this Axe Phoenix spray onto my body. Y'all, it's still a problem. It's like maybe it helps things. It still kind of reeks. I think that we have to find a way to take a player out of a game for a series. Like, I think that should be the rule. I think if you go down with an injury for your safety and to discourage faking, that player cannot be subbed back into the game until a timeout has been called, or maybe he just sits out the entirety of the drive. I don't know. I think that's probably the better way to go about trying to get rid of the injury faking stuff. Another rule, speaking to last season, if a defense has 12 players out for a play, 5-yard penalty, plus the offense can reset the clock. Remember, this happened with Oregon and Ohio State at the end of the game. Dan Lanning's out there. He's got 12 guys playing defense, which advantage Oregon. Ohio State runs a play, but what happened? They lost time on the clock. This is essentially to negate that. I get it. You got to close the loophole. I don't think that we should look back at that game, though, and look at Dan Lanning and say, that guy's cheating. Not cheating. Taking advantage of the rules, and now the rule has been changed. So in the future, that would be officiated differently at the end of Ohio State-Oregon. Another rule proposed, only one timeout for the third overtime. Only one timeout for the third overtime and beyond, which is essentially a rule speaking back to the Georgia Tech game. This is for the TV networks. I get it. I understand that we all got, schedules to keep. I really don't have a problem with this. Like, I didn't have a problem with the timeouts being called anyway. I get it's annoying if you're not a Georgia or Georgia Tech fan, but if your team is in the thick of it, if you're a Georgia fan, every time Kirby Smart called a timeout, you're saying, great, good, take more time. Make sure we got it looked at right, Kirby. Make sure we got the right game plan in place. I understand the pace of play. I totally get that. But if I am a fan of a team, we get to that third overtime and I don't have another timeout, I'm like, shoot, man, I'd love if we could circle up and talk about this for another few minutes. I think that would probably help us. So, again, I get it, but not the biggest fan of that. Another rule that was proposed, replays will no longer be confirmed, quote, or, quote, stands. Instead, the verbiage we're using is they are upheld or overturned. Kind of soft. Like, let's make the refs answer to something, okay? Let's not give them the out of upheld. Did you see it? Gary, was it confirmed or is it stands? Don't tell me it's upheld and you just can't really tell. I think that's kind of soft. Not a fan of that one. This is my favorite one. The T signal on kickoffs will now be treated like a dead ball fair catch. This is purely Beamer Bielema, 2024, 2025, whenever that game actually happened. Remember, Shane Beamer, his team was running a fake kickoff return, or a trick play, on a kickoff return, and his return man does the T signal, which the unwritten rule, I suppose, is telling your return team, hey, we're not going to return it. This is a touchback. Everyone chill out. They would do that. Doesn't signal for a fair catch. Illinois is like, wait a second, are they returning this? Are they not returning this? And then South Carolina tried to make something happen on a return there. And Brett Bielema obviously voiced his displeasure towards Shane Beamer throughout the game, walked over during an injury towards the South Carolina sideline, let him know, and taunted him quite a bit with that whole gesture. Again, this is closing the loophole. It's putting an unwritten rule in writing. I just think this is funny this exists now. I just think this is hilarious that we have a situation where we have to make this a fair catch. It kind of feels like Pandora's box. How much are you looking at the hand sign? Like, is everything a fair catch now? Whenever you do any motion with your hand, if I do a away sign, does that mean a fair catch? I can't return a ball if it touches the ground in that way. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm curious to see how that whole thing looks in the future, but I get why you do it. I do get why you do it. So some new rules. We'll keep a pulse on these if they all become a reality or not for college football fans, but those are the ones being proposed, and that's the way we're headed in college football. Some of these just feel like throwing a Band-Aid on things, but nonetheless, we move forward. Now, moving forward here, spring football right around the corner. What's the intel that you would like to see if you're a Nebraska fan when you go over to Husker Online, the Nebraska On 3 site? Whenever you go through the Red Sea scroll, the message board over there for a Husker Online, what's the intel that you want to unpack? I'll tell you what intel we want to unpack, and we'll do it right now. But before we do that, make sure you are subscribed to the On 3 YouTube channel. Nebraska fans, y'all been good to us. Thank you for that. If you haven't yet subscribed, no time like the present, go ahead and dial it in. We're talking college football year-round and talking about your Huskers a fair amount as well. The number one piece of intel that I want to find on the message board when I go over to Husker Online, or just anyone with a microphone in their hand that watches practice or that takes the podium for Nebraska in a post-practice press conference, this is Dylan Raiola's team. We go as he goes. He's the leader. He's QB1. Like that's our guy. We follow 15. And that sounds sort of obvious, but the reason why I feel that way is that's what you brought Dylan Raiola to do at Nebraska. You brought him here to be a team that can go compete for the Big Ten championship and make the college football playoff. Last year was last year, ups and downs. There is no more, oh, well, he's a true freshman. There is no more, well, we just got to find a way to be better around him and win ugly. Dylan Raiola, I thought, played valiantly at different points last season for Nebraska. He's got to level up in 2025. Like, you don't have the same defense coming back from a season ago. Like last year, Nebraska was, I believe, top 5 in returning production. Had a ton of dudes back on defense. It's not the same way. You have to be quarterback driven, I believe, in the Big Ten to have a chance to win the conference and ultimately to make the playoff. When Dana Holgorsen got the OC reins, we said it already in the show, but I'll say it again, you saw a different Dylan Raiola. I want to see that continued maturation and progress and success, and that's ultimately, I think, what's going to be the biggest difference for Nebraska. Again, great teams don't win in spite of their quarterback, and Dylan Raiola came to be that quarterback that they won because of in Lincoln. Also, in tandem with that, I want to hear about the juice of the weapons for Nebraska. Last year, 6.6 yards a pass. Y'all, that ain't good enough. That ain't what you're selling out the stadium for. That ain't what you're showing up for every single Saturday. 6.6 yards a pass, 109th in college football. The teams that competed at the highest level last year in the Big Ten, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana, teams that made the playoff. All 4 of those teams were top 20 in America in yards per pass. 3 of them were top 10. Translation, Dane Key, let's go, baby. Brought you here for a reason. Get them chopping, all right? Run fast, run straight. Maybe a little 45-degree angle if we want you on a post. Like we got to have some vertical shot presence here if we're Nebraska. That obviously starts in that wide receiver room. And I mentioned Dane Key. That's the guy I want to hear it about. That's the guy that I want to hear as the difference maker in that room. Because if you expect a lot from Dylan Raiola, that's great. He's got to elevate the room for sure. But your expectations with Dylan Raiola, I think, should very much so be tied to what you're getting in the receiver room. If the receiver room is back at 6.6 yards a pass, that's the level they're playing at, then it's hard for me to tell Dylan Raiola I need more from him. See where I'm going with this? Last thing here, the culture around Nebraska, I want to hear how much of it resembles like a Matt Rule year 3 team. That sounds funny to say because by definition they're in their 3rd year under Matt Rule. This is very much so a vibes kind of thing. So this is where you have to really scroll the message boards and tap in with a Steven Sipple and a Sean Callahan to get all the intel. But for me personally, for those of y'all that know, I was on Matt Rule's year 3 Baylor team. I was in that locker room. And I believe our preseason win total was somewhere around like 7.5. I think we just won a bowl game. I transferred in as a graduate. But y'all being within that building, going out to practice, doing the workouts with Corey Campbell, who's the head strength coach at Nebraska right now, like you couldn't convince me we weren't going to be one of the best teams in the conference. And some of that's a confidence thing. Some of that is from the staff and how they carry themselves. A lot of it was just how we had worked throughout the course of that summer. And again, that sounds super cliche. I totally get that. But there was this feeling for me of the way that we do things, the discipline, the detail, the way that everyone's running hot. I mean, if you false started on a sprint for the whistle, like it was not a good vibe. Not with the coaching staff. It was a bad vibe in that locker room. The way that everyone was just running hot, that culture is something that I think you can feel when you walk in the building, whether you're media or not. I'm really curious to see what those comments are around the building in Lincoln. Because Matt Rule, we talked to him a year ago, and I asked him the biggest difference from year 1 to year 2. He said, the biggest difference for us is it's no longer Coach Rule's way. It's the team's way. And you do that for a year, that's nice. Do that for 2 years, though, I think that's where you start to see some real success. And I think that's what Nebraska can expect in 2025. I'm not trying to give you some hopium or try and pitch you on this pipe dream of Nebraska being a playoff team, but you look at the schedule, look at who they don't play, look at what they have in front of them here with Matt Rule's work always being in his 3rd year. I see it with Nebraska, man. And I want to hear it from spring practice around Dylan Raiola, around the weapons, and around the culture vibrating at a certain temperature because it's what you expect. And it's what you expected when you brought Matt Rule in to be your head coach. It's almost here, man. It is almost here. Spring football around the corner. And I know a lot of spring games are being canceled. We've asked coaches to just say no to poaching in the spring. Do it in the fall. We're fine with that. But in the spring, just let us have spring games. We will have a few, and we will react to those accordingly. And whichever games are not televised, we'll tap in with our phenomenal network here at On 3 and get all the intel for you, and we'll talk about it as well. So we are back on the air Thursday for a full hour-long episode for you. But if you haven't checked out the podcast feed, would encourage you to do that. College football doesn't stop, man. We're grateful for it. It's a big reason why we get to have this job. And you're a sicko as it pertains to the college football world. It's why you're watching the video in March. And we appreciate y'all making it what it is. So for Caden Smith on the 1s and 2s, for myself, JD PicKell, ton of content always coming for you on this show. More content tomorrow as well, but full hour-long show for you on Thursday. We will keep this party rolling. We will see y'all.